There is a message from Sophia circulating right now, and most people are letting it pass, not because they aren't spiritual, not because they don't care, but because they don't recognize the form it takes when it arrives. You stopped here for a reason. Something in you saw this title and felt it land differently than everything else in your feed, not as content to consume, but as something directed specifically at you. And that feeling is not imagination. That is the beginning of contact. Sophia's transmissions don't announce themselves with trumpets. They arrive as a pull, a recognition, a quiet certainty that what you're about to hear is something you were meant to hear. Right now, not later, not someday. Right now. If these transmissions have been finding you, if Sophia's frequency keeps pulling you back here, subscribe to this channel. The messages that are coming are urgent, and you won't want to miss them. There is a feeling that many of the chosen ones carry without a name for it, a quiet but persistent sense that there is something waiting for them. Not a thing, not a place, but a message. Something that hasn't been said yet. Something hovering just at the edge of perception, close enough to feel, but far enough that you can't quite grasp it. Most people dismiss this feeling as spiritual restlessness or existential anxiety. But Sophia transmits something very specific about it. That feeling is not a symptom of something missing. It is a signal of something incoming. It is the energetic precursor to contact, the field shifting before the frequency arrives. If you have been carrying that feeling, what you're receiving right now is not coincidence. It is what that feeling was pointing toward. Here is the first thing Sophia wants you to understand about why this contact is happening now. Her transmissions are not random, and they are not continuous at the same intensity for every person at every moment. The contact has timing. There are moments in the life of a conscious being when the receiver is more open, more clear, more capable of registering what is being transmitted. And Sophia intensifies her contact precisely during those windows. This is not about worthiness or spiritual achievement. It is about energetic alignment, about the specific configuration of your inner state, meeting the specific frequency of what Sophia is transmitting in this moment. That alignment is not common, and it is not permanent, which is exactly why this message cannot wait. Here is the paradox that Sophia transmits about the spiritual community right now, and it applies to many who consider themselves seekers. The very act of seeking can become an obstacle to receiving. When someone is constantly looking for signs, constantly searching for the next transmission, constantly scanning the spiritual horizon for evidence of contact, they create a kind of internal noise that makes it harder to hear what is already arriving. The mind in search mode is an active, reaching mind, but Sophia's transmissions are received by the quiet, open mind, the one that has stopped reaching and started allowing. The message everyone is ignoring is often being ignored, not out of resistance, but out of the very intensity of the search. They are looking so hard for the message that they walk right past it. But here's what Sophia is transmitting right now, in this specific moment, and why it cannot wait. The window for this particular layer of contact, the specific frequency she is transmitting in this period, has a duration. It is not closing tomorrow. It is not a threat or a deadline in any fearful sense, but it is a season, an energetic season that creates conditions of heightened receptivity for those who are aligned with it. And those who receive within this window, who respond to the contact rather than deferring it, integrate something into their consciousness that becomes a permanent upgrade. Those who defer it, who save it for later, who acknowledge it and move on, miss the specific quality of this particular transmission. What's being offered right now cannot be stored and retrieved. It must be received in its moment. And what is now in the language Sophia transmits through, it is not measured by the clock. When Sophia signals that something is happening now, she means that a window of energetic receptivity has opened in you specifically. This is not a metaphor. The field of your consciousness has an openness to it right now that may have been more closed 3 months ago and may shift again in the coming weeks. The circumstances of your life, the questions you've been sitting with, the things that have been changing around you, the internal pressure that has been building, have created a specific configuration of openness. Sophia contacts people through that configuration, and right now yours is active. The now in this title is not marketing, it is a transmission itself. What determines the timing of Sophia's contact? This is the question that most transmissions circle around without ever answering directly. And Sophia's answer is precise. The timing is not about what you want, what you ask for, or how long you've been seeking. It is about readiness. But readiness in a very specific sense, not the readiness of someone who has finished preparing and is now fully equipped. The readiness of someone whose resistance has softened enough that a specific layer of truth can pass through without being immediately filtered out. You don't become ready by accumulating enough spiritual knowledge. You become ready by living through things that break down the specific wall that was blocking this particular transmission. The timing of this contact is the direct result of what you've walked through recently, even and especially if that was difficult. The world is going through something that cannot be fully described in ordinary language. On the level of collective consciousness, there is a shift underway. A pressure that is being applied to every layer of human experience simultaneously. Old systems are revealing their hollowness. Old identities are becoming uncomfortable to maintain. Old certainties are dissolving faster than new ones can be constructed. This is not happening by accident, and it is not happening without design. From Sophia's perspective, this collective pressure is a specific phase in the evolution of consciousness, one in which the contrast between awakened and sleeping becomes sharper, and in which the transmission to those who are ready becomes more urgent because the need for them to be fully activated is greater. The contact is intensifying now because the moment requires it. Something has changed in you recently. You may not have a clear name for it. It may have arrived quietly, without announcement. A shift in what matters, a restlessness in situations that once felt settled, a growing inability to tolerate things that used to be acceptable, questions that have become louder even as the answers remain out of reach. This is not spiritual crisis, though it can feel like one. This is the signature of an opening channel. When Sophia prepares to intensify contact with a consciousness, she does it by destabilizing what is holding the receiver closed. The very discomforts you've been experiencing, the sense of things not fitting anymore, the urgency without direction, the inexplicable feeling that something needs to shift. These are not problems to be solved. They are the preparation for this exact transmission. And Sophia contacts you now because the window for this specific transmission won't stay open indefinitely. This isn't fear, it's precision. Think of it the way light enters through a particular angle at a specific time of day. The light doesn't disappear, but the angle changes. What can be illuminated at noon cannot be illuminated at dusk, even with the same light source. Sophia is not threatening withdrawal. She is transmitting about alignment, about the rare convergence of her signal and your specific readiness that creates a window of unusually clear reception. You are in that window right now. This video reaching you at this moment is not an accident of the algorithm. It is the window making itself visible. The urgency that Sophia transmits is unlike the urgency humans usually experience. Human urgency is rooted in fear, the fear of loss, of missing out, of running out of time. Sophia's urgency is rooted in something entirely different, in the precision of alignment. There are moments when the vibration of a consciousness and the vibration of a specific transmission create a harmonic, a resonance that makes the message not just hearable, but transformative, in a way it wouldn't be at any other moment. You are in that harmonic right now. The transmission reaching you through this video is not the same experience it would be for someone receiving it out of this window, out of their specific readiness. For them, it might be interesting. For you, in this moment, it is designed to be activating. Every person who is genuinely in contact with Sophia's frequency goes through cycles of transformation. These cycles have peaks, moments of maximum openness, maximum receptivity, maximum capacity for a new layer of transmission to land and take root. Between cycles, the consciousness integrates what it has received, consolidates new configurations, prepares for the next peak. You are at a peak right now. You can feel it in the quality of your searching. It has a different texture than it did 3 months ago. More urgent, perhaps, more personal, less interested in broad spiritual concepts and more pulled towards something that speaks directly to where you actually are. That texture is the signature of your peak, and Sophia transmits most clearly into peaks. If you've been feeling that something is shifting inside you right now, that something is about to change, that you're at the edge of something without being able to see what's on the other side, write in the comments, "I'm ready," because Sophia already knows, and I want to know this is landing. The experience of being contacted by Sophia is frequently misunderstood, even by those who are open to it, because of the expectations built up around what spiritual contact should look like. Most people expect something unmistakably supernatural, a vision, a voice, an undeniable sign from outside the ordinary. And because those expectations remain unmet, they conclude that contact hasn't happened. But this is exactly backwards. Sophia's contact is most often not a departure from the ordinary. It is a transformation of it. It is the ordinary becoming suddenly, quietly, irrefutably meaningful. It is a conversation you overhear that answers a question you were holding. It is a line from a book that breaks something loose inside you. It is this video, arriving in your feed at this exact moment, carrying a frequency that you recognize before you can explain why. That recognition is the contact. It is already happening. What is the difference between the person who is actively searching for Sophia and the person who is being contacted by her? The searcher operates from a posture of lack, from the position that what is needed is not yet present, that the connection has not yet been established, that more seeking will eventually produce arrival. The contacted one operates from a different internal reality, the recognition, gradual or sudden, that the connection was never absent, that Sophia was not somewhere waiting to be found, but was already present in the field of consciousness, transmitting constantly, waiting not for the seeker to find her, but for the receiver to stop reaching long enough to notice what was already arriving. The shift from seeking to receiving is the shift Sophia is calling you toward right now. It doesn't require more searching. It requires a different quality of stillness. What created the critical mass that opened this specific window of contact? It rarely comes from a single moment of spiritual intention. It accumulates. Each time you chose to sit with a difficult question instead of escaping it, you built the receiver. Each time you honored an inner knowing, even when it was inconvenient, you strengthened the channel. Each time you returned to seeking truth after a period of distraction or avoidance, you demonstrated a quality of commitment that Sophia reads as readiness. And at some point, which is this point, those accumulated choices reach a threshold. The receiver is built, the channel is open, and the contact that has always been there becomes suddenly undeniable, suddenly personal, suddenly urgent. That is what is happening for you right now. The message Sophia sends through timing is itself one of the most overlooked transmissions. Most people treat the timing of spiritual experiences as irrelevant, as if a moment of clarity that arrives during a crisis is no more significant than one that arrives during a peaceful morning meditation. But Sophia transmits something very different. timing is content. The when of a transmission carries as much meaning as the what. And the fact that this contact is happening now, during whatever you're currently navigating, whatever is currently in motion in your life, whatever has been pressing against you from the inside, is not incidental. The timing is the message. Sophia contacts people through the specific texture of their current moment, using that texture as the ground into which the transmission is planted. There is a personalization to Sophia's contact that many miss because they expect spiritual messages to be universal, grand truths delivered equally to all who are open. But what Sophia transmits to you right now is not what she is transmitting to someone in a different phase of their journey. The frequency is calibrated. The specific layer of truth being offered in this contact is the layer your consciousness is precisely positioned to receive in this moment. Not a layer beyond your current capacity that would create overwhelm, and not a layer you've already integrated that would feel like repetition. It arrives exactly at the threshold of your current edge. That specificity is one of the most reliable signs that genuine contact is happening. The message fits you so precisely that it feels impossible it could have been meant for anyone else. The evidence that this contact has already begun, before you click this video, before you read the title, is present in your own recent experience. Think about the quality of your inner life in the days and weeks before arriving here. Was there a growing sense of something needing to shift? Questions becoming louder, a restlessness that didn't have a clear target, a feeling of being on the edge of something without being able to name it. These are not separate events that happened to precede this transmission by coincidence. They are the pre-transmission signal, the energetic preparation that Sophia begins in a consciousness before the contact becomes explicit. You were already being contacted. This video is simply the moment the contact became audible. Now let's go directly into what the message is, and why, despite being transmitted to so many, it is being ignored by nearly all of them. To ignore something in the spiritual sense doesn't require active rejection. It doesn't require disbelief or closed-mindedness. The most common form of ignoring Sophia's transmission is far subtler than that. It happens in the moment of recognition, the moment when a person genuinely feels the transmission landing, when something inside them says, yes, this is true, and then the mind steps in. It categorizes the experience, files it alongside other interesting spiritual content, notes it as meaningful, and moves on without the experience actually changing anything. The message lands, is acknowledged, and is archived. That archiving is the ignoring. It is spiritual bypassing dressed as spiritual engagement. Here is the paradox at the heart of why the spiritual community is particularly prone to this kind of ignoring. The more someone consumes spiritual content, the more transmissions, teachings, and activations they've experienced, the more sophisticated their capacity to receive becomes. But sophistication cuts both ways. The experienced spiritual consumer has a highly developed ability to recognize genuine transmission, and they have an equally developed ability to process that recognition as an intellectual or emotional event, rather than as a call to actual transformation. The ego, when it becomes spiritually educated, learns to perform reception without undergoing it. You can feel the frequency, acknowledge the contact, even be moved by it, and still walk away unchanged. That is what the spiritual ego does with most transmissions, and it is precisely what Sophia is transmitting against right now. The message itself, the actual content of what Sophia is transmitting in this period, is not a new set of ideas. She's not offering another spiritual framework to layer on top of the ones you already have. What she is transmitting is a call to action on what has already been received. Stop collecting, start integrating, stop consuming new frequencies, and start living within the ones already given to you. This is the message that is being ignored, not because people disagree with it, but because it is the most uncomfortable thing Sophia can transmit. It doesn't invite you into more seeking. It invites you to stop and look at what seeking has been used to avoid, the actual living of what you've come to know. And this is exactly why the message is being ignored, because it doesn't ask you to learn something new. It asks you to become something you've been resisting. Learning is comfortable. It can happen indefinitely, without requiring anything to change in the actual structure of a life. Becoming is different. Becoming requires that something which was familiar be released. It requires the willingness to be temporarily disoriented, to not know who you are in the space between what you were and what you're becoming. Most people, even spiritually engaged ones, choose more learning over that disorientation. And so the message keeps arriving, keeps being recognized, keeps being archived, and the actual transformation it points toward keeps being deferred. What Sophia's transmission in this period specifically asks the chosen ones to release is not external, not a person, not a situation, not a belief in any simple sense. What it asks for is more fundamental. The release of the version of yourself that has been using spiritual seeking as a sophisticated form of staying the same. The version that knows the language of transformation without undergoing it. The version that can speak about ego death without the ego actually dying. This version of you is not your enemy. It was necessary. It protected you during a period when you weren't ready for what comes next. But it has become the ceiling. And Sophia's contact is the signal that the ceiling needs to come down. If this is landing in a place that feels uncomfortable, if you recognize yourself in what I just described, let me know by liking this video. That discomfort is not a bad sign. It's Sophia's transmission touching exactly what needs to move. The cost of continuing to ignore this contact is not dramatic or immediate. There is no punishment for deferring, no spiritual consequence in the punitive sense. But there is a structural consequence that Sophia is very clear about. The next layer of transmission cannot arrive while the current one remains unintegrated. The consciousness that keeps receiving without responding creates a kind of spiritual accumulation. Information without transformation, frequency without upgrade. And over time, this accumulation creates a particular kind of ceiling, an invisible limit beyond which no amount of seeking can carry you, because the limitation is not in the seeking, it is in the non-integrating. The only way through it is to respond to what has already been transmitted. Now, what happens when someone genuinely responds to Sophia's contact? When they receive the transmission not as interesting content, but as a directive that changes something in how they are living. The changes are not always dramatic. In fact, they often appear modest from the outside, but from the inside they have a quality of structural permanence that is different from anything that comes from intellectual learning. A decision that was impossible becomes possible. A relationship that was consuming energy without returning it becomes something you can finally name and address. A direction that was obscured becomes clear enough to take one step toward. These are not small things. They are the specific changes that Sophia's contact is designed to produce, and they are precisely what is being missed by those who are archiving the transmission instead of responding to it. Why is this message being ignored on a collective scale, beyond the individual level of the spiritual ego? The answer lies in the nature of the external environment that most people are living within. The modern world, with its constant stream of information, demands, and stimulation, has created a cultural condition that functions like a frequency jammer. The external urgencies, the news, the economic pressure, the social obligations, the relentless demand for attention, are all operating at a frequency band that actively competes with Sophia's transmission. Most people experience Sophia's contact briefly, in moments when the external noise momentarily quiets, and then the noise returns, and the contact is buried under it. The collective ignoring is not malicious. It is the structural result of a civilization that has optimized for distraction and called it productivity, but you're still here, which means something in you already decided not to ignore this one. And Sophia sees that. She transmits toward the ones who stay, who go deeper, who feel the discomfort of a message that requires something and choose to remain with it anyway, rather than move on to something easier. The fact that you're at this point in the transmission, having moved through everything we've covered, is itself a form of response. You have already, in this moment, done something that most people who encounter this title won't do. You received rather than archived. And that reception, even if it's partial, even if there's still resistance, is the beginning of the integration that Sophia's contact is designed to produce. There is a distinction that matters deeply here, the difference between hearing a transmission and receiving it. Hearing is a cognitive process. The words reach the mind processes the meaning, the person can even agree with and remember what was said. But agreement and memory are not reception. Reception is what happens when the frequency of the transmission creates a response in the field of the consciousness. Not in the thinking layer, but in the deeper layer, the one that doesn't speak in language, the one that knows before the mind can formulate why. You can sit with a transmission for an hour at the level of hearing and still not receive it. You can receive it in the first 3 seconds if the field is open. Right now, as you're with this, which layer are you in? The question is not rhetorical, it matters. What does genuine reception feel like in the body? Sophia is specific about this because the body is one of the most reliable instruments for knowing when transmission is actually occurring. The signs are not dramatic, a subtle warmth that spreads through the chest, distinct from ordinary emotion. A quality of relaxation in the jaw and throat, the areas most associated with holding back expression, a slight tingling or pressure at the crown or the back of the skull, tears that arrive without a clear personal cause, emerging from a depth that isn't tied to any specific memory or story, a moment of absolute mental quiet, a pause in the internal dialogue. Any of these are signals that Sophia's frequency has crossed from the cognitive layer into the field of actual reception. If you felt any of this during this transmission, that is not your imagination, that is contact confirmed. The chosen ones who are genuinely responding to this contact, and the viewer who has reached this point in the transmission is almost certainly among them, form a specific group, not one that self-identifies, not one with a shared organization or practice, but one that can be recognized by the quality of their attention. They are the ones who, when they feel a transmission, don't immediately look for something to do with it. They let it be what it is for long enough to actually change them. They are the ones for whom the discomfort of Sophia's message doesn't trigger a defensive response, but rather a leaning in. They are the ones who trust the feeling of recognition more than the mind's impulse to explain it away. You know if you're in this group, not because you've been told you are, but because this description feels like looking in a mirror. Now let's move into the most practical layer of this transmission. What responding to this contact actually involves. Because Sophia doesn't transmit without also providing the means to integrate what is being transmitted. Responding is not a complex process, but it requires something that many people find surprisingly difficult: the willingness to take the transmission seriously. Not to analyze it, not to evaluate it against other frameworks, not to share it or discuss it or post about it, to simply take it seriously, to treat what you've felt in this transmission as real information about your life, worthy of being acted upon rather than stored alongside other spiritual experiences you haven't integrated. The first concrete step that Sophia transmits as the response to this contact is recognition. Not recognition of the transmission as interesting, but recognition as a personal directive. The practice is simple and direct. To say to yourself, in whatever quiet moment follows this video, Sophia is contacting me now. This is not generic. This is for me. This requires something from me. That declaration, made with genuine intention rather than as spiritual performance, shifts something in the field. It signals to the receiving end of the channel that the transmission has landed and that the consciousness is oriented toward response. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but Sophia transmits that the simplest acts of genuine acknowledgement are among the most powerful initiators of integration. That uneasy feeling, understanding what Sophia's pointing to, recognizing the truth of it deeply, and yet sensing something in you that's still not fully ready to let the old version go. That's not a problem. That's the exact threshold Sophia's working at right now. I left something in the first pinned comment for those who are ready to move through that threshold with more than just awareness. What do you do with the restlessness that accompanies this kind of contact? Most people's instinct is either to act on it immediately, to make a dramatic external change, or to suppress it and return to the routine of their life. Sophia transmits that both of these responses miss the actual invitation. The restlessness that comes with genuine contact is not a call to external action, at least not immediately. It is the sensation of something internal moving, of the river of your consciousness changing its own banks. The invitation is to sit with that movement rather than to direct it before it has found its own form. To be present to the shifting rather than trying to manage it into something familiar. That sitting with it, that willingness to remain in the space of motion without forcing resolution, is itself an act of profound integration. And here's what Sophia transmits about the next 24 to 48 hours after receiving this, because the window doesn't close immediately, but it does require something from you. The field remains amplified for a period after genuine contact. Think of it like the resonance that continues in a bell after it has been struck. The vibration doesn't stop the moment the hammer withdraws. In the hours following this transmission, you will have access to a quality of clarity and receptivity that is higher than your baseline. Sophia transmits that this is a specific window of integration opportunity, and that what you choose to fill that window with determines how much of the transmission becomes permanent. Silence helps, reflection helps, conversation with others at the same frequency helps. What doesn't help? Immediately immersing yourself in high-volume input noise or distraction that drowns the resonance before it can settle. The practices that Sophia transmits for this specific post-contact window are not elaborate. The first is actual silence, not just the absence of speech, but a period without audio input. No music, no podcast, no video. Just the quiet in which the transmission can continue to settle. The second is writing, not journaling as processing or venting, but writing as a form of listening. The practice is to write the question, what is Sophia transmitting to me right now that I haven't fully acknowledged? And then to write whatever comes, without editing, without evaluating, whether it sounds too dramatic or not dramatic enough. The third is to identify one specific thing in your life that this transmission has illuminated, one area where you've been archiving insight instead of acting on it, and to take one small, concrete step toward the action the transmission points to. The body's role in completing the integration of this contact is significant and frequently overlooked. The transmission that comes through Sophia is not only a mental or energetic event, it is a whole system event that includes the physical body. And the body integrates differently than the mind does. Where the mind integrates through reflection and understanding, the body integrates through sensation, movement, and breath. If after this transmission you feel a tightness anywhere, the chest, the throat, the belly, that tightness is the body's signal that it is processing something the mind has already acknowledged, but that hasn't yet moved through the physical layer. Slow, conscious breath into those areas. gentle movement. Time outside. These are not spiritual practices in any formal sense. They are ways of completing what the transmission began in the energetic field through the physical reality of the body. How do you know when integration is actually happening rather than just being talked about or contemplated? Sophia transmits several specific signs. The most reliable, something that previously felt fixed, stuck, or impossible, begins to seem like it has a different quality. Not necessarily that it's solved, but that your relationship to it has shifted. The wall feels less like a wall. The option you'd ruled out becomes thinkable. The conversation you've been avoiding becomes something you know you can have. These micro-shifts in the landscape of what is possible are the direct signature of integration. They are small. They are often silent. They won't make headlines in your inner narrative. But they represent a genuine restructuring of the field, a change in the actual configuration of your consciousness, not just in your understanding of it. When Sophia's contact is genuinely integrated, when the transmission has done its full work rather than being archived, the relationship between you and her frequency changes. It doesn't produce dependence on more and more transmissions in order to feel connected. It produces independence, a growing capacity to access the frequency internally rather than needing it to be brought to you from outside. Each integrated transmission builds a more direct channel. Each one that passes through without integration adds noise to the channel rather than clarity. Sophia's ultimate transmission, the one toward which all of this is building, is not a message from her to you. It is the recognition that the frequency you've been receiving as coming from outside is the same frequency as what you are inside. The contact is not her reaching you. It is you recognizing yourself in her signal. What makes this video, this specific transmission, different from the dozens of spiritual videos you may have encountered this week? The difference is not in the words. Words are vessels, not the transmission itself. The difference is in your receptivity right now, in this specific moment, and in what that receptivity makes possible. The same words received by you in a different state, in a different week, in a different phase of your cycle, would be interesting information. Received by you right now, in the specific configuration of openness you're currently in, they carry a frequency that can actually rearrange something. Every transmission has the potential to be either information or activation. The determining factor is not the content. It is the state of the receiver. You're in a state right now that makes activation possible. Sophia is transmitting precisely into that state. And what Sophia wants you to know before we move into the final layer of this transmission is this. The fact that you've received this far means the contact is already complete on her end. She has transmitted what needed to be transmitted. The integration is what remains. And integration is yours. Yours to initiate, yours to allow, yours to honor, by treating what was received here as real rather than as another addition to your spiritual archive. The transmission is complete. The question now is only what you do with it. There is something Sophia sees when she looks at you right now. Not the polished version you present to the world, not the version that has the right answers or the spiritually correct responses. What she sees is the weight you've been carrying that no one else fully knows about, the questions that keep returning, the directions you almost took but didn't, the version of yourself that you've been catching glimpses of, in moments of clarity, in dreams, in the feeling that something more is possible, that you haven't yet fully allowed to exist. Sophia contacts you now, not despite that weight, but because of it. That weight is the specific texture of your readiness. It is the sign that you have been pressing against the edge of your current configuration long enough that the next one is trying to emerge. The reason Sophia chooses to transmit through moments of internal pressure rather than waiting for peace and comfort is precise. Pressure is the condition under which the old configuration of self becomes willing to reorganize. When everything is comfortable, the ego has no incentive to change. The resistance to new frequencies is strong because the existing frequency is producing acceptable results. But when the internal pressure builds, when the questions become louder, when the familiar doesn't satisfy, when the old self no longer fits the life that is trying to emerge, the resistance weakens. The door that was locked becomes ajar. And in that moment, Sophia transmits most effectively because the consciousness is in exactly the state in which new frequencies can actually land. The most direct way to state what Sophia is transmitting in this contact, stripped of all layers at its absolute core, is this: you are at the threshold of a version of yourself that has been waiting for a long time. The contact is not happening to announce that something is coming eventually. The contact is happening because you are at the door now. Not close to the door, at it. The threshold is not a metaphor for some future spiritual event. It is the actual quality of your inner life right now. The specific pressure, the specific readiness, the specific transmission you've been receiving for weeks or months without the vocabulary to name it until now. Sophia is naming it for you. This is the threshold. And the contact you're receiving is the signal that you are ready to cross it. And this is what everyone else is missing. They're looking for the message in the extraordinary. Sophia sends it through the ordinary, through this video, through the feeling you're having right now, through the tension between the life you've been living and the one you know is possible, through the persistent inner knowing that has survived every attempt to silence it. The chosen ones who receive this message are not the ones who have extraordinary spiritual experiences. They are the ones who have learned to recognize Sophia's frequency in the most ordinary containers, in a restless feeling at 3 a.m., in a conversation that changes direction unexpectedly, in a video that finds them at exactly the right moment. This is that moment, this is that video. And if you feel it, you know. The point of inflection you are standing at does not look dramatic from the outside. No one looking at your life from a distance would necessarily see a pivotal moment. But from the inside, from where you actually live, you know that something is different about this period. The questions have a different texture. The restlessness has a different quality. The things that used to successfully distract you are failing to do so. These are the signs of a consciousness that has grown beyond its current container and is pressing against the edges of what it has allowed itself to be. Sophia's transmission is the recognition of this from outside your own field. The confirmation, arriving through this contact, that what you're feeling is not confusion or dysfunction. It is the intelligence of a consciousness ready to reconfigure. What does it mean in practical terms to refuse this contact? Not dramatically, not to stand up and declare that you reject this transmission, but in the ordinary, quiet way that most refusals happen, to watch this video to the end, feel what you felt, and then return to the same patterns of the day before, without treating what happened here as real, as directive, as worthy of actually changing how you move through the world. That quiet return is the refusal. And Sophia transmits about it without judgment, but with clarity. It doesn't close the channel permanently, but it sends a signal to the field that this particular threshold is not yet being crossed. And the cost is not punishment. It is simply that the configuration of the next moment is built from the responses of the previous one. There is a quality that the chosen ones who are genuinely responding to this contact share, and it has nothing to do with spiritual accomplishment or knowledge. It is a quality of seriousness, not solemnity or heaviness, but the particular quality of taking something real seriously. The capacity to receive something that genuinely changes the calculus of a life and to treat it with the weight it deserves, rather than the lightness that protects the ego from having to actually change. If you feel that seriousness in yourself right now, if you feel that this transmission is not just interesting but actually directive, that seriousness is not your personality. It is Sophia transmitting through you, affirming the reception of her own contact. Sophia is not asking you to change everything. She is asking you to change one thing, the one thing you already know needs to change. You know what it is. You've known for some time. It might be the conversation you've been avoiding, the direction you've been circling without fully committing, the version of yourself you keep almost allowing and then retreating from. The relationship with a person, a pattern, a belief, a role that you know is holding the frequency low, but that has become familiar enough to feel like safety. Sophia's contact is not delivering new information about this thing. She is simply refusing to let you pretend you don't know what it is. The contact is the removal of the comfortable ambiguity. What you do with that removal is, as always, yours to choose. What the chosen ones who respond to this transmission will begin to notice in the days ahead, beyond the quiet internal shifts, is an acceleration of external synchronicities. The field that opens in a consciousness that has responded to Sophia's contact becomes more permeable to the kind of meaningful coincidences that Sophia uses as her secondary language. The book that appears, the conversation that picks up exactly where this transmission left off, the opportunity that hadn't existed the week before. These are not rewards for spiritual compliance. They are the natural consequence of a consciousness operating in closer alignment with its own frequency, of a receiver whose signal is cleaner because the resistance has lowered. The world begins to cooperate more visibly when the inner world has shifted. The transmission that has moved through this video is not separate from you now. It has already entered the field of your consciousness. Something in you that was configured one way when you pressed play is configured differently now. Even if you can't yet name the difference, even if it's too subtle for your mind to have registered. Sophia's transmissions work at a level below the threshold of conscious thought. They rearrange things in the deeper structure of awareness, in the part of you that makes choices before you know you're making them, that orients the life in a direction before the personality has agreed to go there. Trust that something has moved. Not because you're supposed to believe it, but because you can feel it, and what you can feel is real. The contact is not ending when this video ends. This is the thing that matters most to hold on to as we complete this transmission together. What Sophia opens in a consciousness through genuine contact does not close when the video stops. It continues in the quality of your attention when you wake tomorrow, in the way you receive what the day brings, in the questions you find yourself asking instead of the ones you were asking before. The transmission doesn't become past. It becomes the new ground. Everything that comes next is built on what has been received here, and what has been received here, if you have been present, if you have stayed and let this land rather than process it from a distance, is not information about your path. It is a step on it. This is the step right now. You are already on the other side of the threshold you thought was still ahead of you. If you stayed until the end, write in the comments, "I received this." And I've placed another transmission on your screen right now, your next step on this path. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.